Hello, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to this course unit 12 of CFLM213, and the topic for today is all about the communication process. Okay, let's start. So what is communication? Communication, this is something about, or this is happening between two signals, diba? Or dalawang tao, or it's either laging may connection. Merong nakikinig, merong nagsasalita. Merong tumatanggap, may nagbibigay. Yan. So, communication. Communication is a fundamental to the existence and survival of humans as well as to an organization. Diba? Sabi nga natin, communication is the key. Why? Because it is a process of creating and sharing ideas, information, views, facts, feelings among the people to reach a common understanding. We need the communication in every day of our lives kasi kailangan natin maintindihan. Diba? Just, kahit naman sa anong simpleng bagay, kailangan may communication. Basta we're dealing with other people. Diba? Communication is the key to directing function of the management. So, sa ating leadership at sa ating lahat ng management, kailangan yung communication. Kailangan nga, diba, as a leader, you are a good communicator. So, a manager may be highly qualified and skilled, but if he does not possess good communication skills, all his ability becomes irrelevant. Kahit pa nasa yun yung kagalingan, lahat ng skills, katalinuhan, talents, kung hindi ka marunong mag-communicate with your people, ganun din, walang kwenta. Bakit? Kasi hindi ka nila maintindihan eh. So, therefore, paano mo sila makakatulong kung ikaw lang mismo ang nakakaintindi sa sarili mo? So, a manager must communicate his directions, yung pagbibigay natin ng or parang binibigyan mo sila ng task, diba? Effectively to the subordinates to get the work done from them properly. That is why it is very important na good communicator itong mga leader or manager natin. So, communication is a process. Bakit naging process, ma'am? Sabi ko nga kanina, kasi kailangan may nag-i-interact dyan eh. Merong nagbibigay, merong nakikinig. May tumatanggap, may nagbibigay ng mensahe. So, the communication process refers to a series of actions, tama yun, or steps taken in order to successfully communicate. Kahit nga lang makikipag-usap ka, diba, sa classmate mo, kaibigan mo, or kahit sa ka-chat mo lang. Diba? It involves several components such as the sender of the communication, the actual message being sent, the encoding of the message, the receiver, and the decoding of the message. So, the overall goal of the communication process is to present an individual or party, or sometimes in a group, with information and have them understand it. So, the sender must choose the most appropriate medium in order for the communication process to have worked successfully. Kasi sender, okay, ikaw yon. Kanwari, ikaw, may sasabihin ka dun sa classmate mo. Si Juan, may sasabihin kay Pedro. So, si Juan ang magiging sender. Okay. Encoding. Yan na. Saan mo lalagay yung message mo or anong format ang gagamitin mo, di ba? O, yan na. Iniisip mo, encoding. Pina-formulate mo sarili mo. Ano ba yung sasabihin mo? That is encoding. Tapos, eto na yung message mo. Nabuo mo na yung message mo. Ang tanong sa message mo, saan mo siya dadalhin? Anong format? Sasabihin mo ba ng personal? Sasabihin mo ba sa chat? Sasabihin mo ba sa call? Diba? Or susulat ka ba? So, that is a channel. After that, syempre, merong receiver. O, si Juan, sinong kakausapin niya? Si Pedro. So, pagkadating kay Pedro, siya yung magiging receiver. Anong gagawin niya? After niya na-receive yung message niya, i-decode niya. Titingnan niya if naiintindihan ba niya yung mismong sinasabi ni Juan. So, that is a communication. Kaya sabi niya, it is a process. Kasi, kailangan maintindihan mo yung sinasabi ng iba. That is a good communication. So, communication is a continuous process which mainly involves three elements: the sender, the message, and the receiver. So, the elements involved in the communication process are explained below in detail. For example, number 1, sender. Yung sender, yung magbibigay ng message. So, the sender or the communicator generates the message and conveys it to the receiver. He is the source, siya yung pinanggalingan, and the one who starts the communication. Yung sender, siya din yung starter. Diba? After that, darating tayo sa message niya. Ayan na, message. Message, it is the idea. Yan, it is the idea, information, view, fact, feeling that is generated by the sender and is then intended to be communicated further. Ito yung gusto mong sabihin. After ng message, syempre, ito na yung encoding. Ayan na. Saan mo lalagay? The message generated by the sender is encoded symbolically, such as in the form of words. Ayan, pwedeng words, pwedeng pictures, pwedeng gestures, or pwedeng through it is for example, pwedeng words, diba? Pwedeng pictures, pwedeng gestures, pwedeng through yung vocal or written, ganyan. Before it is being conveyed. Ayan na. After mo na-encode dyan, pipili ka ng channel mo or media. Ayan. It is the manner in which the encoded message is transmitted. Anong gagamitin mo? Through chat ba? Paper ba? Call ba? Video call ba? Through in-person ba? Or through the another person ba? That is a media. So, it's a manner in which the encoded message is transmitted. The message may be transmitted orally or in writing. The medium of communication includes sometimes telephone, internet, post, fax, email, and many others. Minsan nga gagamit ka pa ng tao or minsan mga hayop, 'di ba? Ibon, ganyan. The choice of medium is decided by the sender. Siyempre, ang magdi-decide ng media or yung channel mo is yung sender. Kung sa tingin mo, saan ba karapat dapat isend or anong gagamitin mo para maliwanag na makuha ng receiver mo. Next is decoding. Ito na. It is the process of converting the symbols encoded by the sender. After the decoding, the message is received by the receiver. Ito na si receiver. Sino receiver? Siya yung tagatanggap nung binigay na message ni sender. So, he is the person who is in the last chain and for whom the message was sent by the sender. Once the receiver receives the message and understands it in proper perspective and acts according to the message, only then the purpose of communication is successful. Kasi kahit na meron kang magandang medium, yan, ganyan, kung hindi naman natanggap ng maayos yan ni receiver mo, or hindi niya naintindihan, walang kwenta yung communication mo. Okay? So, after nun, once the receiver confirms that to the sender that he has received the message and understood it, the process of communication is complete. That is feedback. Ayan. That is yung feedback. Ano yung response mo? Kaya sabi nila, kapag hindi nag-reply sa inyo yung tao, that is still a message. Diba? Sinin ka. Ayan. Or hindi kumibo, that is still a message. Diba? Anong sabi niya sa'yo? Wala, nasin lang ako. That is still a message. Ayaw niya sa'yo or ayaw niya lang talagang mag-reply sa. That is a message. Or baka busy siya. Ayan. That is siya feedback. So, feedback sometimes pwede siyang sabihin niya kung ano yung nararamdaman niya or ano yung naiintindihan niya dun sa pagkabigay mo ng message. Or sometimes, if you're not getting a response, sabi niya, no response is also a response. Diba? No response at all is a message also. Then, lastly, number 8 is noise. Ito yung noise, tingnan nyo, nasa lahat. Yan. Diba? Ano yung noise na yan? It refers to any obstruction that is caused by the sender, message, or receiver. Bakit? Kasi diba ang noise pwedeng traffic yung chinat niya sa'yo kasi walang signal. Yun yung mga noise. For example, tingnan nyo, bad telephone connection, faulty encoding, mali yung pagkakachat mo, diba? Faulty decoding, inattentive receiver, poor understanding of the message, kaya minsan hindi nyo naintindihan sinasabi nila kasi hindi mo na iba yung pagkaintindi mo sa message nila, ganyan, due to prejudice or inappropriate gestures. Yun yung mga noise, yun yung mga dahilan kung bakit hindi nagkakaroon ng magandang communication or parang nagiging iba yung message nung sender. That is noise. Ayan, no? Message. Ayan. Sender, encoding, message, receiver. Tapos, receiver, pwede kay feedback, mapupunta kay sender. Tapos, ang noise, laging nasa message. Kasi, di ba, minsan, wala kang connection. Or minsan, na-late yung pagpapadala mo. Ayan. So, madaming mga factors ng noise. Ayan. So, we have different types of communication. Actually, we have two. Formal and informal. Okay, let's start first with this formal communication. So, what is formal communication? Formal, ma'am, na nasa organization siya. Yes. Formal communication are the one which flows through the official channels. Yun talagang, meron talaga yung sapat na medium. Designed in the organizational chart. It may take place between a superior and subordinate. A subordinate and superior or among the same cadre of employees of managers. These communications can be oral or in writing and are generally recorded and filed in the office. Yung mga formal communication, for example, gumagamit kayo ng Gmail, gumagamit kayo ng official GC, that is the formal communication. Formal communication may be further classified by two, okay? It's either vertical or horizontal. Punta muna tayo kay vertical communication. So, vertical communication, as the name suggests, flows vertically upwards or downwards through formal channels. Upward communication refers to the flow of communication from subordinate to a superior, whereas the downward communication flows from superior to subordinate. Vertical, yung pahalang na patayo, yung patayong ganyan. Okay, for example, vertical communication, pag sinabi nating upward communication, mag-i-start siya dun sa smallest mammal. Or for example, siya yung member hanggang kay leader. Ganun siya. Yun yung upward. Magsisimula siya sa pinakamababang posisyon. Pag sinabi naman nating downward communication, therefore, mag-i-start siya sa pinakamataas, sa pinaka-leader nyo, pinaka-president nyo, downward sa pinaka-member. Ayan. So, that is the two vertical communication. Application for grant of leave. Ayan. Submission of progress report. Request for loan. Some examples of upward communications. Upward communication, ito yung, di ba, application for grant of leave. Sinong magli-leave ba? Siyempre, yung member. Kanino yung papapirma yan? Siyempre, sa boss niya. Kaya, upward. Pataas, di ba? Ito yung nagpapaalam ka sa kinatataasan. That is upward communication. Yun namang downward communication. Pag example, itong leader nyo, sabi niya, mag-meeting tayo. Ayan. Sending a notice to employees to attend the meeting. Ayan. Delegating work. Binibigyan nila kayo ng task. To the subordinates, informing them about the company policies are some example naman ng downward communication. Basta tandaan nyo, kapag upward, mag-i-start siya dun sa pinaka-member lang papunta kay leader. Kapag naman downward, mag-i-start siya sa pinakamataas ng pinakamataas ng leader nyo or manager nyo, papunta sa mababa. So, that is vertical communication. Ito yung patayo. Yan. Next naman tayo. Horizontal communication naman. Horizontal or lateral communication takes place between one division and another. For example, a production manager may contact the finance manager to discuss the delivery of raw materials for export. Ang horizontal communication, ito naman yung parang pahiga na ganyan. Yan, that is horizontal. So, ibig sabihin, hindi siya, yung parang nakikipag-communicate ka sa kapwa mo member, nakikipag-communicate ka sa kapwa mo leader, that is horizontal communication. Yan. So, types of communication networks, informal communication. Number 1, we have single chain. Sa single chain naman, in this type of networks, communicates flows from every superior to his subordinate through a single chain. Ibig sabihin, downward lang, isang downward lang siya. Kunwari, president, vice president, secretary, member. Ito yun ang single chain. So, laging ganun lang. Laging galing kay superior, tapos papaba kay pinaka-member. Next, meron din tayong will. Ang will naman, in this network, all subordinates under one superior communicate through him only. They are not allowed to talk among themselves. Ang will naman, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, lahat yan mga subordinates. So, lahat yon hindi sila makikipag-communicate kay subordinate 1, subordinate 2. Lahat kayo makikipag-communicate lang kay leader nyo. That is will. Okay? Bawal silang makipag-communicate sa kapwa nila leader, kapwa nila member. Basta lahat ng communication, ko-communicate lang nila kay leader. Kaya tinawag siyang will. Next naman, we have circular naman. In this type of network, the communication moves in a circle. Each person is able to communicate with his adjoining two persons only. Sa circular naman, binibigyan kayo, parang paikot. Okay? Moves in a circle. Each person, meron kang pwedeng kontakin, kaso dalawa lang. Yung mga bodies mo lang. Next, we have free flow. Okay? Ang free flow naman in this network, each person can communicate with any other person freely. There is no restriction. Ang free flow naman, ito yung kahit sino. Kahit na pinakamababang member ka, pwede ka nang mag-coordinate kay president. Ganun siya. Sa circular kasi, ito yung tinatawag natin na yung bago ka makapunta sa taas, kailangan dumaan ka muna dito, ganyan, bago ka makapunta sa pinaka-president. Ganun siya. Next, we have inverted V naman. In this type of network, a subordinate is allowed to communicate with his immediate superior as well as his superiors also. So, however, in the latter case, only ordained communication takes place. Ang inverted V naman, pwede kang diretso kay leader mo at pwede ka rin makipag-coordinate dito sa kapwa mo manager. Ganyan. For example, may manager ka. Yan, may kapwa o manager sa Jollibee, manager sa McDo. For example lang naman, under one lang ng company, ganyan. Meron kayong pinaka-boss. Ang inverted V, pwede kang makipag-communicate doon sa kapwa mo manager. Tapos, pwede ka rin mag-communicate kay leader. Ang pinagkaiba niya kay Will, for example, yan, si manager ng McDo, manager ng Jollibee, si Will, bawal silang makipag-communicate yung dalawang manager sa isa't isa. Kailangan kapag nakikipag-coordinate sila, kay leader lang. So, you get it? Again, those are the types of communication network signals and formal communication. We have single chain, will, circular, free flow, and inverted V. Next, another type of communication is the informal communication. Ito na informal. So, any communication that takes place without following the formal channels. Kasi 'di ba kapag formal, ito yung talagang nasa trabaho nyo, nasa organization nyo na dapat isundan kasi yun ang plataforma natin. Ang informal communication, ito yung walang sinusundan. Okay? Ganun lang siya kasimple. The informal communication is often referred as the grapevine. Yan. As it spreads throughout the organization and all direction without any regard to the levels of authority. Ito yung mga simpleng kwentuhan nyo. So, the informal communication spreads rapidly, often gets distorted, and is very difficult to detect the source of such communication. Perfect example ng informal communication, chismis. Mga chismis na nagaganap sa room, mga chismis na nagaganap sa office. Ayan. It also leads to rumors which are not true. Ayan. People's behavior is often affected by the rumors and informal discussions which sometimes may hamper the work environment. However, okay, sometimes these channels may be helpful as they carry information rapidly kasi mabilis eh. So, minsan, nagiging helpful din. Therefore, may be useful to the manager at times. Informal channels are also used by the managers to transmit information in order to know the reaction of his or her subordinates. Basta kapag hindi siya dumadaan sa proper natin sa organization, therefore, ayan, informal communication yan. Simpleng chismis lang, yung mga simpleng kwentuhan lang. Next, communication barriers naman. So, ano naman yung mga barriers na meron tayo kung sa mga communications natin? Ayan. The communication barriers may prevent communication or carry incorrect meaning due to which misunderstandings may be created. Kaya nga barrier eh. Kasi ito yung mga dahilan kung bakit hindi kayo nagkakaintindihan ng kausap nyo. Ito na. So, therefore, it is essential for a manager to identify such barriers and take appropriate measures to overcome them. So, the barriers to communication in organization can be broadly grouped as follows. Number 1, we have this what we call semantic barrier. So, what is a semantic barrier? So, semantic barrier, these are concerned with the problems and obstructions in the process of encoding and decoding of a message into words or impressions. Normally, such barriers results due to the use of wrong words. Ayan, mali lang yung wrong spelling, ganyan, faulty translations, and different interpretations. For example, sabi niya, a manager has to communicate with workers who have no knowledge of the English language, and on the other side, he is not well conversant with the Hindi language, or sabi natin Kapampangan, ganyan. Here, language is the barrier to communication as the manager may not be able to communicate properly with the worker. Yung mga semantic barrier, ito yung mga kanwari, wrong spelling ka lang, or sometimes mali yung pagkakatranslate. Yung mga semantic barriers. Yung mga tipong talagang mali lang yung ginamit mong medium. Yan. That is semantic barriers. Minsan nga, na-typo ka lang, iba nang iisipin nila, diba? That is semantic barrier. Next naman, meron tayong psychological barriers. Ano naman to? Psychological barriers, emotional or psychological factors also act as barriers to communication. Yes. Sabi nga nila, wag kang makipag-communicate or wag kang magbibigay ng desisyon kung galit ka or malungkot ka. The state of mind of both sender and receiver of communication reflects ineffective communication. A worried person cannot communicate properly and an angry recipient cannot understand the message properly. Diba? Kapag worried ka, hindi mo alam, aligaga ka, hindi mo alam ano sasabihin mo. Kapag naman galit ka, kahit anong sabihin ng kausap mo, hindi mo yan pakikinggan. Bakit? Kasi galit ka. Naka-block lahat yan. Hindi ka nakaka-receive. So, thus, at the time of communication, both sender and receiver need to be psychologically sound. Kaya dapat kumalma muna kayo bago kayo magsalita eh. Or dapat intindihin mo din muna. Yan. Also, they should trust each other. If they do not believe each other, they cannot understand each other's message in its original sense. Yan yung mga psychological barriers. Hindi lang to wrong spelling. Ito na talaga yung dahil may dinadamdam ka. That is why hindi mo maintindihan yung sinasabi ng ibang tao or yung sinasabi ng partner mo or kung sino man ang kausap mo. Kaya mas importante kapag nakikipag-communicate ka, kailangan kalmante muna kayong pareho. Kapag kalmante na kayong pareho, doon pwede na kayong mag-usap. Para naiintindihan nyo na. Kasi kapag carried nyo pa yung emotion na yan, yung mga psychological factors na yan, the more na mag-argue lang kayo, the more na hindi nyo maintindihan ang isa't isa. Next. We also have organizational barriers. Ito naman. So, the factors related to organizational structure, rules and regulation, authority, relationships, may sometimes act as barriers to effective communication. In an organization with a highly centralized pattern, people may not be encouraged to have free communication. Also, rigid rules and regulation and cumbersome procedures may also become a hurdle to communication. Organizational barriers, ito yung mga formal communication na minsan, bakit kasi bago pa ma-approve itong leave ko, dami munang dadaanan. So, sometimes, yung message nilang ganyan, hindi na napupunta sa taas kasi isipin nila na ang daming rules na susundan. Na kapag nag-chat ka, kailangan may ganito muna. Bago ka magpaalam, kailangan may ganito muna. So, that is organizational barriers. Next naman, personal barrier. Ano naman tong personal barrier? The personal factors of both sender and receiver may act as a barrier to effective communication. Why? If a superior thinks that a particular communication may adversely affect his authority, he may suppress such communication. Ito na yung mga pang-personal na kanwari, mataas ang tingin nila sa sarili nila or parang dapat ako yung leader, hindi sila dapat yung nakikipag-chat sa akin ganito. Yan. Also, if the superiors do not have confidence in the competency of their subordinates, they may not ask for their advice. So, the subordinates may not be willing to offer useful suggestions in the absence of any reward or appreciation for a good suggestion. Yung personal barriers, yung parang hindi mo feel yung kausap mo. So, parang, di ba, kapag, kanwari, hindi mo feel yung taong yun dahil sa ugali niya or dahil sa authority niya or sa power niya, hindi ka magsasalita. Doon na mag-start yung walang communication. Hindi mo papansinin, iiwasan mo siya, ayaw mong mag-open sa kanya. So, that is a personal barrier. Hindi yung psychological, Ang psychological kasi galit ka, ganyan. Ang personal barrier, this is something that you feel. Okay? This is something that you feel from that person. That is a personal barrier. Yung kanwari, nahihiya kang mag-approach sa kanya. Ayan. Or sometimes, feeling mo, dapat hindi ka nila ina-approach. That is a personal barrier. So, those are the different types of barriers. Yan. So, we have tips niyan. So, how can we communicate properly? So, these are the tips for improving the communication process. So, here are some tips to consider to improve your communication skills and the communication process overall. Number 1 is, simplify your message. Kung ito lang naman ang gusto mong sabihin, yun na lang direkta. In order to ensure your message is properly understood, you should keep your language simple and to the point. Eh di kung kanwari, ito lang, ang gusto mo lang naman sabihin, kanwari, yung simplify your message, madalas yan sa mga babae. Diba? Tinatanong na siya, galit ka ba? Hindi, ang dami mo niya sasabihin na kung ano-ano, bago niya sabihin na totoo galit siya. Diba? So, minsan na mangyayari, hindi siya maiintindihan nung kausap niya. Kasi hindi nakasimplify your message. Ibig sabihin, ang dami mo sinabi, pwede mo na sabihin, ayoko to. Diba? Pwede mo naman sabihin, galit ako. Pwede mo sabihin, nagseselos lang ako. Or pwede mo na sabihin, hindi kita maintindihan. pero ang dami mo nang kinatak. Kaya sabi niya, simplify your message. Number 2 is know your audience. Ayan. It is also important to consider the audience that will receive your message as well as their needs and interests. Pag sinabing know your audience, for example, salita ka ng salita dito, tapos pala, English ka ng English, tapos pala yung mga kausap mo, mga mangmang sa English, hindi marunong mag-English, ganyan. O yung alam lang nila is yung ating Tagalog. Hindi ka rin nila maintindihan. Kaya dapat alamin mo din, know your audience, alamin mo. Naiintindihan kaya ako nitong kausap ko. Yan. Next naman is, be a good listener. Kailangan nakikinig ka. As a communicator, it is important to actively listen to what those around you are saying. So, this will ensure that you're sending the right message. Baka naman kasi sinabi niya, kanwari, ano kasi yun? Alam niyo, di ba, mahilig tayong ganito sa mga Pinoy, yung, kumain ka na ba? Busog pa ako eh. Diba? Ganun sasabihin nila. Ang tinanong naman sa'yo is, be a good listener. Kumain ka na ba? Ang sagot mo lang dapat doon ay oo or hindi. Pero ang sasagot mo, busog pa ako eh. Dapat yung, kanwari, naririnig mo ng maayos. Be a good listener. For example, sino ba yung tatay ni ganito? Tapos sinagot mo yung tatay ni ganyan. Diba? Kailangan naririnig mo para makapag-receive ka or makapag-feedback ka sa kanya ng tama. Next, ask questions. Ito, ask questions. It is also important to ask good questions to keep the communication flowing. Diba, kailangan magtanong ka, lalo na kung hindi mo naintindihan. Kaya nga pag nagdi-discuss ako, kung hindi nyo naintindihan, sasabi ko, naintindihan nyo ba? Tapos sabi nyo, oo, tapos hindi naman pala. Yan. Kaya mangyari, hindi babagsak kayo sa quiz, ganyan. So, it's also important to ask good questions to keep the communication flowing. Make sure your questions are insightful and engaging. Ayan. Ask questions. Diba kahit kapag may kausap ka, kung ikaw na lang mismo yung nagkukwento, tapos siya parang wala na siyang interest, hindi na siya nagtatanong, diba mawawalan ka ng gana na magsabi sa kanya? Ayan. You need to ask questions, lalo na if you need for the clarity or parang clarification of everything. Next is, take time to respond. Hindi yung agad-agad sasagot ka. When communicating, it is important to consider how you might reply to a person to ensure you know what you want to say. Hindi yung agad-agad nagre-react ka. Kailangan isipin mo muna ano sasabihin mo sa kanya. Yan. Baka kasi yung sinabi mong ganito, ma-misinterpret niya. Kaya take time to respond. Next is consider your body language. Ayan. If you're communicating through a different medium, for example, magkaharap kayo, ayan, it is important to be mindful of your body language. In addition, be aware of the body language of the person you're communicating with as well. Kasi yung mga body gestures natin, may sinasabi yan. 'Di ba? Kapag nakita ng kausap mo na talagang alam mo yung nakaipit yung kamay mo sa dalawang braso mo, tapos nakakabesa ka pa, parang alam na alam niya na ayaw mo mag-open or magsalita. Meron tayong mga body language na tinatawag kapag sa communication. Next is you need to maintain an eye contact. So, it's also important to make contact with the person or group you're communicating with. This will show that you're actively listening to who you're communicating with. So, kailangan kapag may nakikipag-usap sa'yo, diba, tinitingnan mo sila. Kaya, diba, minsan nakakabastos yung, kanwari, kinakausap ka, pero siya nagsa-cellphone lang ng nagsa-cellphone. Diba? That is, we need to maintain eye contact para nakita nila na interesado ka or nakikinig ka doon sa sinasabi niya. Next is clarify your message if needed. This is something na parang nagtatanong ka lang din. If the recipient of your message is unclear, ayan, about what you're trying to say, it is important to clarify your message. This will help them better understand you. Kasi kapag hindi mo naintindihan tapos nag-respond ka doon, lagot ka. Baka iba pala yung sinasabi niya tapos oo ka ng oo dyan. So, those are the tips for improving your communication. So, wala naman kayong quiz for today. So, mag-quiz tayo on Monday. Good day, everyone.